Hey everybody, welcome to Watches with Dennis, and it is the Saturday live stream that I like to do. Only one topic today, but hopefully it'll be a good one. I don't know if we'll go the full time, but I wanted to talk about today the revival of Universal Genève. This was announced, it feels like forever ago, and it's not quite time for the brand to go live, but some new poll routers have actually come out, and so because of that, it's on the radar again. Not to mention there was a recent interview with Georges Kern, the CEO of Breitling, and who is overseeing this work with Universal Genève as well. So we will go ahead and we will get into that. But I want to do a few housekeeping items as usual. On the list today is my G-Shock. I actually found out that this G-Shock had run out of power. I'm like, how did this happen? I don't know. I last wore it at night outside right after the time change, so it was darker than I had expected. But regardless, I thought everything was going to be okay. I hadn't really checked the power meter in quite a while, so I got it out of the box yesterday to wear, and it was completely dead. And I was like, did I get water in this or something? I put it out in the light for a little bit, and it kicked on with low power. Had lost all of its sync and everything. Like the time was, like, it was completely drained. So it's been trying to charge, but it's very cloudy out. So I got it up part of the way today, and my plan is to wear it for today. What's happened since the last live stream? I had one pre-recorded video, and that is about one and done watches. A lot of people do one and done watch videos, so I decided why not take my spin on it. I did it a little different. Well, I can't claim it's a little different than everyone else, but I'm going to say it's a little different than a lot of other ones I've seen where I watch them and I'm going to go ahead and say I am positive the people are talking about watches they have never actually owned. And so they are just giving you a shopping list. And I could do that too. I mean, I guess if you guys want even more variety, I can talk about watches and tell you which ones should be your one and dones without ever actually having experienced them. But I thought I've gone through a lot of watches at least I think I've gone through a lot of watches. So I went ahead and did one where it was only watches I'd actually owned myself. And so it's quite a range. I don't have anything in there that retails over $10,000, and I have a number of watches in there that are under $1,000. So I really do think it's a pretty approachable one and done list. But we'll see based off of the feedback what people think. Another thing, housekeeping wise, it's not out yet. It might come out today. Depends how my editing goes. Is my state of the collection every calendar year, usually in November. Last year I think I did October, but usually in November. I do a state of the collection for the calendar year. So my 2024 state of the collection, I filmed it last night. So if I look tired in the video, that is why, is because it was dark when I was working on it. And this morning I actually got done with my first rough edit, but I still need to go in and label all of the watches so people can see what they are, because I don't have them all memorized, like reference number and stuff when I go and do that. I think I've got it under 30 minutes, but it is over 20. So it's going to be a longer video. Probably won't do all that great, but I do like to, it's more for me anyway. So I just enjoy doing it as a good snapshot. And I also always cover the watches that have left since the last day of the collection at the start. So you'll be able to see those. And I have B-roll footage of all those watches. So you'll actually literally see them as well. But I'm hoping to get that out this weekend. I think I'll be able to do it later today. I don't really have any plans because football was yesterday. And all right, that my blood pressure cannot take the Chiefs performing like this. It's a heavy burden for me. So there's that. And then I might be on another live stream tomorrow. That's not completely confirmed yet, but just as a heads up, I'll probably share a link in the Discord, which is linked in the video description, and also through the post feature on YouTube if that does end up happening. But it's a possibility. And it'll be a watch one, not a pinball one if it does happen. So those are the main things housekeeping wise. This topic today is Universal Genève. However, before I jump into it, I do want to touch on one other thing that happened to crop up. I will go ahead and catch up with chat first, and then we'll do the one other thing, and then we'll talk Universal Genève. So Thomas, good morning. Yes, Thanksgiving went well for me. I saw your show this morning. Part of it, I ended up falling back asleep after about 30 minutes. I decided I was up way too early. But they had a live panel today going over I think it was fairly affordable watches was the idea. I think the idea was keeping them under 2,000 pounds was the upper limit. I think it was. Good morning, Kevin. Welcome to the live stream, and good morning, Rob. And thank you for being a 99-cent club member. Same to Tuna. Appreciate that. Appreciate the support. Underhay, welcome to the live stream. and Underachieving Watch Collector, who I believe did comment on that new video that had come out. Okay, the one thing I wanted to do before getting to Universal Genève, I couldn't find an article on it this morning. I was only looking for about 5 minutes though, but I saw a post yesterday or the day before that Brick Watch Company is going out of business. And for those that are 99-cent club members, you have emojis, little emojis that you can use that are channel specific. I mean, they're not all that interesting, so we don't really talk about them. But there is one with a clown holding bricks. That was in honor of Brick Watch Company. That was a image I mocked up with a clip art clown and some bricks, some clip art bricks, because when Brick Watch Company came out, I think it was just 2 years ago. These were like white label watches. Think kind of those Trump watches that came out last month, and way overpriced. And it was just like everything spec wise was terrible. That it wasn't that the watches were bad in and of themselves. They were bad for the price. I mean, like gouging. I actually had someone, I don't block very many people on this channel. I actually had someone come into a live stream who was very upset that I criticized that company. And I did end up having to block them, or choosing to block them. I suppose I didn't have to, but I chose to, because they were just spamming the chat. But anyway, I guess for Black Friday, the decision was to mark the watches down. I want to think I read 80%. There's still probably too much versus what you could just all order off of AliExpress, quite frankly. But I guess he's raised the flag and said this business didn't work out. I didn't see a lot of detail. I think there was some criticism of watch collectors and enthusiasts sort of tearing the brand down, which, I mean, yeah, it kind of happened. But given the choices they made, I don't feel bad about it, because I feel like, I won't say necessarily we have a moral obligation, but I think it behooves us, if we want to do right by potential customers, to warn them when things are not a good deal or really bad deal. And it wasn't just like this isn't like, should the reversal really be $2,000 more than it was 3 years ago? This was like, absolutely not. This is not right. You can get Tudor 1926s for this price, and you're going to have a far more prestigious watch. So why would you go with this? Why would you go with this option, sort of stuff? But also that he didn't fully understand the watch market itself. And I think he launched when there was still that thought that watches were going to go up and up and up and up. You remember, everyone was riding high during the pandemic, and that is not the reality, or now back to a status quo in the world of watches, which I think most collectors appreciate, but most entrepreneurs probably long for the quote unquote good old days. So that is the end of the kind of transition from housekeeping to the main topic. Hello, Joel Bolt. Glad you were able to make it. Kevin, glad you had a really good Thanksgiving, and that you actually have dry weather in Lakeland. I don't know if Lakeland's normally dry or not. I've been to Orlando 3 times, and it was raining every day, every time I've gone. But I think that's pretty normal for Orlando. And let's see. I see Thomas has said that video. Oh, so it's a video that came out. Okay, I have not seen the video. Video of Portney saying that he has to mark the watches down to under what they cost him to make was cringe. I can't believe they cost him $600 to make. I mean, again, because I don't think he knew much about the watch, by his own admission, and I do believe he's being honest, that he didn't know much about the watch industry when he decided to get into it. I could conceive that white label brands may have gouged him. It is possible that they may have overcharged him, and then he in turn overcharged the consumer. The bottom line is, though, I'm not in the business of doing anything. This is just a hobbyist channel. But if I want to say I'm in the business of anything in watches, it's to be pro-consumer, not pro-entrepreneur, pro-industry, pro-manufacturer. Same with me in pinball. That it is not my job to prop up companies. It's the little guy that needs more protection, not a business. And so, if that was what happened, he should have done better due diligence, because there are plenty of micro brands that work with a variety of suppliers. There was no reason why he could not have gone in and had reasonable pricing on his watches. If indeed this is true and he got gouged by the white label, that's my speculation. But if he's being honest about that pricing, but I don't know. And I don't really care, quite frankly. So I think we have just about heard the last of it, which is probably for the best. But that clown with the brick hands can live on forever. You can probably, if you've got it, you could probably get it to post in the chat. I think there's a way. I don't know. I don't usually use emojis. But today we're going to talk about something far more prestigious than Brick watch company. We're going to talk about Universal Genève. So I'm not a watch historian. I don't know a lot of the history about Universal Genève other than it was a very popular dress watch brand. I would describe it as many brands were back in the past. It wasn't, when we say dress watch, we don't mean like unobtainable high end. This was not Patek Philippe. Most watch companies didn't really distinguish themselves on a ladder of luxury or affordable or whatever. There were varying prices that made the accessibility a range, but there weren't a lot out there that were just trying to go and be exclusive. And Universal Genève was not trying to be exclusive. It was very much a watch of the people, but it had certain designs. It tried to cater to pilots. It had a whole thing going on with it. And like many brands, it ended up becoming dormant. You got quartz crisis, post quartz crisis. Lots of brands went away. Lots of brands got revived later on. Universal Genève hasn't actually been dead for like decades and decades. It was another entrepreneur that picked it up, I think in China a number of years ago, but they never really did much with it. I think they put out a few watches. They didn't catch on. It didn't really go anywhere. I think it was seen as more of a pet project, but I'm really reaching beyond what I can remember because this was stuff I had read about years ago. So fast forward to today, or almost today, and Georges Kern, who is the CEO of Breitling, had indicated that Breitling, had acquired Universal Genève, not to operate as a subsidiary, not to be like a King Seiko under Seiko, but rather as to be its own standalone brand like it used to be. But obviously, it's going to be in partnership with Breitling, much in the same way that Hans Wilsdorf Foundation owns Rolex and Tudor, and maybe certain things are shared, but they operate as two separate companies. Or maybe another example that you might like now, as of 2017 or so, is Seiko and Grand Seiko. They're under the same conglomerate. They operate as two totally separate entities. Grand Seiko is not a little like division of Seiko. They spun it completely off, which I think they needed to do in order to better segregate where it was trying to shoot for in the market versus where Seiko tends to exist price-wise. Anyway, we're going off on little tangents here. So the reason why I think this is so worthy of discussion today is we have started to see the first look about what we're going to get out of Universal Genève. And there are a couple of things. I have two articles listed below, and I'll start sharing the screen here in a moment. We're not going to go all the way through them because I think this is supposed to be more of a discussion, and I'm hoping chat that's watching live will be able to be interactive on that. And of course, if you're watching the recording, go ahead and share your thoughts on all of this in the comment section. I do go back and read all of that. But some new Polerouters were revealed. Now, for those that aren't familiar, the Polerouter is like I think it is it's the first I know of, Gerald Genta designed watch. And it has for a long time been really the only affordable Gerald Genta. That varies a little bit. You can argue that there are Cartier Pashas that are pretty obtainable secondhand. And obviously all the Polerouters people are getting now are secondhand watches. However, it was always a relatively affordable watch. Like for a few years ago, pre-pandemic, I think you could find them for around $1,000 in working order. Nowadays, it might be closer to $2,000. I've checked some out. Actually, there was Koji, who's one of the 99 Cent Club members, was in Kansas at one point a few months ago, and we went to a shop. Went out to lunch and went to a shop in Lawrence, Kansas, and they had a Polerouter. So I did actually try one on. Not my favorite design, but more in my vein than a lot of what Genta got known for later on. And those of you that are watching that don't know Gerald Genta's designs, the Patek Philippe Nautilus, the Royal Oak from Audemars Piguet, Cartier Pasha, he did a version of that. The Locomotive out of Crador is his. And the Ingenieur out of IWC. Those are probably the most famous models that he worked on, as is the Polerouter. But the Polerouter is a very traditional looking style watch. So those have just recently been revealed. Now, the brand itself is not expected to actually go live for consumer purchasing until 2026. So we're over a year away still before UG formally launches. But there was an interview in Monochrome with Georges Kern, so that's linked. And obviously, I'm not going to read the interview to you, but I want to pull a few things from it. And so I've linked it so that you have the opportunity to go back and read it. And then I also have the link to a blog to watch because they actually got some hands-on with the Polerouters that ended up being revealed as these two are two of the new ones that came out. So they have a stainless steel Polerouter, and these will be part of the collection, is my understanding. at least a couple of them in 2026. And then that's another shot of the steel one. They have a rose gold one with black dial, and then they actually did a white gold one, which I think is being auctioned. At least the first one is prototype wise with a blue dial. Sorry, I should have probably just scrolled down and went to the gallery. That's what I'm going to do. We're going to go to the gallery, guys, so that I can just pick the photos because I'm not here to read the article to you. But it was very interesting because it actually has a bracelet, which when I saw this, I did not realize this was one of the gold ones. And it reminded me of a different look, but this style of bracelet reminds me of that really cool little chain link style gold bracelet that Patek Philippe does on the current Ellipse. And I don't care for the ellipse shape, but I like that bracelet. And I've wanted to see that bracelet on other styles of watches. So anyway, so white gold, yellow, or rose gold, and a steel Polerouter. So, and this is the one that a lot of people, and with gold hands, I believe, on all of them. So this is sort of the direction that they're planning to go. I'm going to go ahead and get caught up with chat, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the questions I have for folks that are watching live or that want to comment later regarding information that was coming out of that Georges Kern interview. But first I must hydrate, and then I must catch up a little bit with what you all are saying. So let's see. This is actually back on the Brick Watch Company. Joe, thank you incidentally for being a 99-cent club member. I do appreciate it. Assume he made a ton of money on the initial sales. He is a smart business guy. He is probably still making money at $400. I suspect it is all a grift. He is just doing a going out of business. Yes, that could be. Definitely could be. And he is, in New York, and one of the millions traveling tomorrow. Well, yes, I heard the Wednesday before Thanksgiving is the busiest travel time of year, but of course people have to come back. Though I imagine a number of people will end up coming back Sunday, and some people might actually take off the following week or parts of the following week. With Thanksgiving, it gets a little tricky, depending if you're traveling or not. I stayed within the state, so my travel was very, very minimal, and I'm working all of next week. But I know I have a few people that are planning to be out back at the job. Thomas with the Escapement Show says the Polerouter was Gerald Gento's first design at the age of 23 and one of my favorites of his designs. Okay, so it was his first. And Koji, thank you for being a 99-cent club member. And I mentioned our interaction with the Polerouter when we were in Lawrence a few months ago, if you weren't on for that. I hope they reissued the Tri-Compacts and Shadow as well. Eugene also made excellent chronograph movements for JLC in the 30s and 40s. That's a very interesting point about the chronograph because that's a little bit of what got touched on in this interview. And I liked the photos with the new Polerouters more here. So that's why I'm over early with the blog to watch, because I'm not here to talk so much about the Polerouters other than let you see kind of what they look like. But in terms of some of the goings on in the interview, there are a couple of pieces that I want to go ahead and use as our launching point. So one of the big questions, and why when I opened this UG segment, I talked a lot about the accessibility of it, that the Polerouter today is a very popular watch. One, because as you can see, this is a modern one. We can actually look at a more classic one if you would like. In fact, I think we have to go over to the Kern interview if you want to see like some of the old ones and stuff. Some of the So here's one of the classic Polerouters. So you can see that the design is similar. Like again, as you would expect, it's the same model. So the handset on the current one, it's clearly is more refined. They've gone with the dolphin hands rather than these arrows, which remind me very much of an Aquaterra today. You could combine all sorts of broad arrowhead hand designs, I suppose. But the generalized, bezel area, towards the chapter ring, we've still got that same vibe with the double baton and all of that. And of course, you've got the whole SAS thing with the wings, which is actually one of my least favorite parts of the look on this. But again, they've got it so it's balanced against the UG logo that they're running with. And they have the logo and the name. We could criticize a variety of things about this, I suppose. But that's sort of the direction that they've ended up going. But you can see how they're sort of modernizing while still trying to keep the same case shape, the same lug configuration. Lug configuration is often one of the main things you will notice when people try and do a reissue, but they do a modernization. A case in point, which doesn't even have to go all that far back, is if you look at Parmigiani Fleurier and their Tondas, the PF Tonda with the integrated bracelet still has the teardrop lugs. That's the Tonda. The Tonda's the lugs. That's one of the most key features about that design language. And so lugs are often a key part of the design language. And so you'll often find when people revive watches, even if you see differences in the dial, take a look at the lug profiles and see if they're still respecting that, because usually they will, because that provides the case shape in and of itself. But anyway, back to the discussion about the interview, or my lead up into what comes out of the interview. So the Polerouter has been, both in the day when it came out, was an accessible watch, and on the vintage side remains one of the most accessible ways to get into Gerald Genta. A lot of people that are not comfortable spending luxury watch prices a few years ago could still easily stretch into a Polerouter, and nowadays it's a bit harder, but we're still talking, south of $4,000. So what about where UG is going to be moving forward? And when Breitling was first announcing that they were acquiring UG or had acquired UG, I remember it had been said that the plan was that Breitling was going to be here. I'm doing this right with the way the camera is for you guys, but UG was going to be up here at a higher price point than where Breitling is going. And Breitling ain't exactly got a whole ton of stuff on the entry level side anymore. Not like Tag, which still has like this range with their quartz stuff all the way up into their fancier mechanicals and chronographs and all that. Breitling is a little bit further up, and then it goes way up, especially if you go into gold and stuff. Well, the interview with Georges Kern here has actually provided more context. Their current plan is to launch these style watches, time-only stainless steel watches, at roughly 15,000 Swiss francs. So I haven't done a recent conversion. So you hear me typing right now. So I'm going to do one right now. So 15,000 Swiss francs is just over 17,000 US dollars. So that's where they want to start these watches at. And then they're going to go up more if they're complicated, which you would expect, and if they're in precious metal, which you would expect. But launching at $15,000, adjusting for inflation, however you want to do it, that is not what UG was. So this is a different UG. This is going to be, we are luxury. And in this interview with Georges Kern, he talks about how he still wants the brand to be this sort of accessible, not high-end super luxury, but clearly it's high-end enough that it's not. So he describes it as it was never a super niche brand. No, it was never a super niche brand. But it's not a Calatrava, right? It's not $30,000 starting or $33,000 starting like a Patek Philippe is. But I mean, 15,000 Swiss francs, $17,000 for a time-only stainless steel watch. I'm not saying it's unheard of, but I'm just saying that is definitely not even on the affordable luxury side or entry-level luxury side. A lot of people would not necessarily, maybe you'd call it mid-work. I don't know where we all have our own definitions. I don't know where you start mid-level luxury, but I'll tell you what, when you've priced things higher than the professional line of Rolex retail, like this is more than Subs, this is more than Pepsi's, it's more than the Daytona retail. Yes, I know maybe that's not fair, but that's what Rolex thinks their watch is worth, is what they put the MSRP at. It's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see how it plays out for them. I mean, they're coming in lower than where Parmigiani positions their stainless steel watches. Okay. Parmigiani's also take quite a bath on the secondhand market, probably because of what they think they can command versus what reality is once people get a hold of those watches. It's well above Cartier for stainless steel. It's well above Omega for stainless. I'm just saying, see where it is. They went in saying we want it above where Breitling is, and they've definitely achieved that. But this is a long dormant brand. Does it have the cachet to command those level of prices? The history is there. The problem I have is in the history, that wasn't what this brand was. So I don't know that this is a smart move or not. I get why they're doing it. The idea is UG won't cannibalize the sales of Breitling if they're operating in two totally different price brackets. It's the whole Swatch Group strategy. Everything's in the pyramid in Swatch Group. Everything's supposed to, there's some overlap with some model lines, but everything's supposed to be in its place. Glashütte Original is supposed to be more expensive than Omega, broadly speaking. Omega is supposed to be more expensive than Tissot, and Tissot is supposed to be more expensive than Swatch proper. It's the rule. That's how they've got it all set up. And in other groups like Richemont, that seems more like maybe they do cannibalize against each other. But I really struggle with. I can understand them asking for values of that on non-stainless steel, but I don't know. So I want to go ahead and see where the chat is on that, because that was the main thing that made me want to do this live stream, was to have a conversation about this discussion. I'll throw back up a photo here, but here we go. I mean, the interviewer with Monochrome asked, what are we talking about in terms of a price range? 10,000 Swiss francs, 100,000 Swiss francs. And George said, we're most likely going to start 15,000 for non-complicated steel. And of course, all the other things that they note are of course going to be higher prices, but that's where that is. So, okay, let me go ahead and get caught up with the chat, and then we will continue the conversation from there. Let's see. Koji says, strangely enough, I've never seen a Polerouter with broad arrow hands. Pretty nice modern version from the pics, I'd say. I do like them overall. I think the dial language here, just the amount of text, it's a busy watch. Definitely not unheard of in this day and age. We do see a lot of relatively busy watches. But it's a clean look. Here's my thing. Other than this bracelet on this white gold one is very interesting. But other than the lug configuration of the Polerouter and what we've got going on here near the chapter ring, which I do like. I really do like how this is done at the chapter ring. But I can get this look. Like I own this look. Like I have lots of Dauphine hands and all the rest. Like there are lots of dress watches that have this vibe that execute in some other ways better, in my opinion, than what we've got going on here. So while I like this at this point, especially with this price point, granted, this is a new price point, but I'm going to look used because I buy watches used all the time. And I'm going to be like, I could get a used Calatrava is going to be well over what this is in stainless steel. Will it be well over what it is in gold? I'm not sure. I don't know what these will end up trading for, the gold versions used. But I can get a Vacheron Constantin Traditionnel with this handset for less than this watch is new in steel. And I can get a precious metal one of those. So that's where I'm running into that sort of situation. That's the comparison that I make. And it's a comparison that I do to all sorts of things. I mean, it's the same thing that the poor Rolex 1908 has to face. Rolex's 1908 actually is very reasonably priced at MSRP. And if you look at the platinum one, it actually is a pretty good price for a platinum dress watch, but there's just a lot of competition in that space. And if you start factoring in what you can get secondhand or gray market for some of the brands, you get in under those prices, and you have more, if you care about it, you have more dress watch pedigree from those other brands, because Rolex has just never been able to make a name for itself in the dress watch space. Datejust and day dates are not dress watches, guys. They are classy sports watches. They are not dress watches. You can use them as dress watches if you want, but metal bracelets and 100 meters of water resistance is not dress watch space, in my opinion. Trap Vision, welcome to the live stream, says, good morning. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I did. I hope you did as well. Underhay says, I like that new Polerouter, but the hand should be longer so that the minute hand travels over the ring with the hour markers, and the hour hand can get closer to it. Rather expensive for a zombie brand. I know some people get really hung up on the positioning of the, and incidentally, closed case backs too, which is fine. But we're not paying to enjoy a movement decoration here with our $15,000, or in this case more, because this is the rose gold version. Some people get, I'm less, this is one of those things where I'm actually less picky on, but I know a number of people are very, very particular about wanting the hour hands to kiss those hour markers and the minute hand to kiss those minute markers. And so it's an interesting point. Again, I suspect some of that they could do longer hands with a mechanical movement, so it's not a big deal. Weight is more of an issue with quartz watches with the handsets. But, given what the movement size probably is in this watch, when we're going to touch on that in a little bit, that might be part of the reason why it is the way it is. But I'm not sure. I think they just decide it stands out more if they don't let it overhang. And so the gold, because it's the same, like in this instance, you have this black center of the dial, but then you have the rose gold for the chapter ring, and then you've got the same rose gold for the hours, minutes, and seconds. And so I assume in an attempt to not have the hand blend in and get lost into the chapter ring, they have elected to go this route. However, that really, I think, only applied to that version, because if we look, is it so much so for the white gold one? I mean, kind of. It's not for the steel. It's not an issue for the steel one at all. See, the steel one went with rose gold hands, but then you've got a silver, so it would have been fine to extend them on that one. And that's the one most people are going to be interested in, because it's going to be the most affordable one. Anyway, interesting. Thomas says that's absurd. 15,000 Swiss francs is way too ambitious. Look, George has turned Breitling around. You're going to hear my punch. He's turned it around. He has been the savior of Breitling. He took that bloated Bentley 48 millimeter nonsense chronograph brand and turned it into a desirable powerhouse where, super ocean controversies aside, has had hit after hit after hit with the redesigned Navitimer and the Chronomat and all the rest of it, and the B01s and everything. So he's gonna kernify UG, and it's gonna be great. And everyone's going to be like, this is absolutely fair pricing. Maybe. I have my concerns, as I've been expressing. Koji has his concerns, as he has now expressed. And Underachieving says, makes the bricks, as in Brick Watch Company, pricing super affordable. With their new 80% off, yes. Actually, even before the discounts, yeah, Brick Watch Company may have been overcharging for their watches, but they were, south of $5,000, much less 17,000 US, like this thing is going to be commanding. And don't get me wrong, I love a gold handset, even on a stainless steel watch, but let's not act like putting gold hands in, solid gold hands, is like a lot of gold. It's not. If the case isn't solid gold, and the bracelet, the case and a bracelet, if there's a bracelet, those are where lots of gold are used. Handsets, indices, and all of that, I like it. Like, I like that Rolex uses white gold indices on their watches, but let's not pretend like it added a whole lot of cost to them to use that little amount of gold, because there ain't much gold there. I mean, these are watches. They're not cars. These are very small things. Obese Tuna, welcome to the live stream, and thank you for being a 99-cent club member. He says, beautiful watches, but 15,000 Swiss seems rather expensive for what truthfully has not been relevant for some years. But they're going to try and make it relevant. They're going to make it relevant again. That's the idea. That's the plan. That's the scheme. Koji says, even if they put in some Geneva Seal movement, it's still too expensive. I was trying to think, is there a MSRP or a new, retail available Geneva Seal watch for under 20,000 US, or let's say about 18,000 Swiss francs, to do a rough conversion? I couldn't think of one. But I can't think of very many watches that do Geneva Seal anymore. Vacheron clearly does a lot of it. Chopard does some of it. I know there are other brands that got to be doing Geneva Seal, but I cannot name them for you. So I wish I should have done better research, because I've been kind of curious about it, but I just haven't looked into it. But it remains a challenge, regardless. So let's see. Tuna says that UG below Breitling would sell like hotcakes. Yes, but I feel, and I don't know, that's an interesting thing. I think it's because they get more of a dress watch vibe. But why did they decide not to put it under Breitling, like under in the price ladder? And I just think that they feel UG, maybe because it's a zombie brand that they're bringing back, that there's this opportunity to give it life up at a higher tier, and dress watches are expected to go for more than sports watches, and Breitling is a sports watch company, and it is what it is. So I that's my assumption on why they went this particular direction, but they didn't have to. But again, we're really only pointing out Polerouter right now because, one, it's the most famous UG brand because of model because of Gerald Genta, but UG had a lot of other watches. And they are, like, in the interview with Georges Kern on Monochrome, again, with the link in the video description, he goes into like how they plan to bring back a bunch of other stuff, but not just do a bunch of vintage revivals. So it's kind of an interesting blend. And again, you can go and read the article, but I'm going to paraphrase it as George really emphasizes that obviously they bought the brand to have the history, to have the catalog. So it doesn't make sense to just go and outright do new stuff under UG, because why'd you buy UG if you just wanted to do new stuff? But that he had already had conversations with the governing board for Universal Genève that they've spun up, and to give them the understanding that they are not to just come in and start demanding all of this stuff straight out of the vintage catalog to just reissue. He does not want UG to be a reissue. So I think the plan will be they're going to use the old vintage model lines, and kind of like what we've seen with a number of other companies, like maybe IWC with the iGeneer, they're going to do some reimaginings. They're going to do some modernization. They're going to do some revisioning to bring it up to the 21st century, but the old model lines. And so you're going to see things that are familiar, like dial configurations, lug shapes, that sort of stuff. That's going to be the same, but there's going to be other big change ups. There might be different language placements on the dial textures that weren't done in the past. These are my guesses, but he does not want to just do straight up reissues. That he does not. And I get there's twofold reason for that. One, it's kind of boring. It's not very creative. And of course, there's all the vintage stuff that they did not buy up off of the used market to purge, like we've seen other brands do in the past. Like I think Ulysse Nardon at one point went and bought up a bunch of their old stock to increase their value. I'm not aware of UG doing this or Breitling doing this. So there's a lot of UG out there that just, I mean, it somewhat devalues the new brand. The thing is, it's been so dormant for so long, aside from some false starts that have happened, that there is a lot of gap between those. And most people, like I have very little interest in owning a watch that vintage. It's just a big hassle. The other thing, though, is the issue with just doing reissues is you get this reminder about how much cheaper it was if you do a straight up reissue. You'd be like, why did this watch go up, 5 times the value of what it would have been, even inflation adjusted, for the old one? And people will more readily do that if it's like a 1-for-1 update. So I think those are the things that kind of suppress that. Dr. LK, thank you for being here for the live stream. Says Breitling want to make money, overpriced. Sorry, you can pay less for more in other brands. Absolutely. And so that's where I knew they wanted a position above Breitling. So I can't say I'm shocked that they ended up launching or mentioning in the interview that they're again, this brand isn't really going live till 2026. But saying that these things were going, this is the steel one, and that this is going to be 15,000 Swiss francs, 17,000 US dollars is what they currently are planning. And I'm just like, that in steel, it's not lucent steel. It's steel with a very little amount of gold for some hands. I don't see it. I really struggled with this. I don't know, with a closed case back watch and all the rest of it. I don't see where the value is. I don't see that to me, nothing's handcrafted about it, and there's no movement decoration to enjoy. I would not buy this for $17,000. No way. I wouldn't buy this for 7,000 US dollars. It's just, there's just not enough to it, in my opinion. Maybe if the brand was better established, my opinion might change a little bit, but it's been a long time, and I don't buy off of history. Trap Vision says it's a great looking piece, but the price is a complete turnoff. I'd run to Frederic Constant or Karl Bucherer instead. Those are two very good examples where you're going to get looks that, all right, they're not going to be Polerouters, but you can find looks that are going to fit this vein that I think would be very satisfying, and the pricing is going to be a lot better. And with Karl Bucherer, you can go used on and get like precious metal watches well under the price point of the stainless steel is going to launch at. Another aspect that I wanted to point out that came up in this interview, moving from that pricing itself, is, and it got mentioned earlier, there was some discussion about the idea of what they used to do in terms of movements and all of that. It was Koji's comment. I'll pop it back up here where he mentioned that some of the things he wanted to see reissued. But it was the second sentence that was interesting to me, where he says, UG also made excellent chronograph movements for JLC in the 30s and 40s. Well, that in and of itself doesn't come up in the interview, but something similar does, which was a conversation about the synergies. And so I'm going to jump to that part of this interview where Monochrome asks, regarding production, we can expect synergies with Breitling, or do you imagine UG as a completely standalone company with its own production, its own movements, its own distribution? And George notes, yes, there will be some overlap. And then there is this part. Developing an entirely new and high-end chronograph movement is extremely costly. It would potentially push the price for a stainless steel chronograph to 25,000 Swiss francs or more. That's not where we want to position ourselves. Our approach to movements will vary depending on the type, whether it's a classic automatic, micro rotor, or a chronograph. This language tells me that the B01 is going to be the chronograph movement in the UG line. That's what Do you guys disagree? Am I misinterpreting that? 25,000 Swiss francs would mean that a chronograph stainless steel, if they develop their own movement, and he's correct, would be over 28,000 US dollars for a stainless steel chronograph. Somehow developing the chronograph movement didn't end up pushing the Breitling chronographs up that much, but nonetheless, this is what he is claiming would happen with Universal Genève. So what I'm wondering, and is this going, again, he's hedged depending on what the watch is. Are they not going to do in-house movements at all? He seemed to leave the door open that it's the way it, to me, and I'll see what you guys think, but the way I read that interview response was, we might do in-house movements for like this, like the Polerouter, like time only, time plus date. We might do maybe with a micro rotor, for a thin movement, but complicated stuff like chronographs, third party, or in their case, is going to be first party, but over with sister Breitling. It'd be like Tudor going ahead and using Rolex movements or something. Or a better example would probably be kind of what we see with Swatch Group, where you've got ETA, and ETA is, maybe they'll make some custom tweaks for like Hamilton or something and call it the H31, but it's still just a Valjoux 77.5X base thing that they've, slowed the hertz down to give you a longer power reserve or whatnot. So it's that, though. That's the idea is they're not projecting in regards to Koji's statement that they are planning to be what they were. So to me, this begs the question, if they're not even going to be putting in effort into high-end movement development, what am I paying for? Because that is, I do think people have gone overboard on the in-house movement, like as collectors. And this is going to sound kind of mean. I don't mean to make it mean or too preachy, but a lot of y'all talk about in-house movements like you actually know what you're talking about. And you know what an in-house movement is versus a third-party movement. But what I think is so amusing, and maybe I'm wrong, but I struggle with this as well, is I don't really have a value sense about, I know it costs money to develop an in-house movement. And so we as collectors have ended up telling brands we want in-house movements just because. And we make rules for them like, I ain't going to pay over $1,000 for an SW200. I ain't going to pay over $4,000 for an SW300. But I'll pay infinity dollars for an MT whatever out of Tudor. And it's like, but we don't, you don't, or at least I don't. And so I'm projecting that you don't, by and large, understand, like, are we really getting like an extra $8,000 worth of value because they in-housed it? You're going to have less independent watchmakers that can even service the thing. So that's not a positive. What'd you get out of it? And it depends, like, because sometimes I can see things and I can go, I understand that. I know I get that. So like I see the Tudor in-house movements and I see they aren't 38 hours of power reserve. They're 70 hours of power reserve. And I'm like, all right, that's value, but how much value? And when Tudor first put out their in-house movement, the date functions weren't working right. And they had to do recalls and it was, or they had to service a bunch of them at no cost. It was just a mess. Like it was not a good movement. The ETA was better. The Solita was better than that. But on the flip side, I look over at Patek Philippe and they're like, hey, look at our Cubitus. And we've modified our in-house movement. And it's like 40 some hours of power reserve. And they finally let it hack. To me, I might as well just have an ETA. I don't like, at least somebody down the street could service it for me. So anyway, I don't want to, that went on a weird tangent. My point being that we value in-house movements, and I'm fully acknowledging we don't always know what we're talking about when we say we want in-house movements, because in reality, it often actually just puts us in expensive boxes that don't help things. But on the flip side, research and development of a new thing is understandable to everyone. And so we are willing, whether it's right or wrong, we are willing to spend more money for in-house movements because we know they need to recover the R&D costs. So we're willing, at least up to a point. At some stage, we got to say, you know what, I think Tudor paid off their movement. I think we should be saying that. We don't, but we should. But here, if you're starting at 17,000 US dollars, and that's not even an in-house movement, I am really flummoxed about where you're claiming that this value is. And we've seen this blow up all the time when they dance around it and do weird things. Not them as in Universal Genève or Breitling, but Panerai, very famously, in-house movement, and still had the stamps of the actual Ebosh movement that they had tweaked. they had made some adjustments. And so they claimed it was an in-house movement. And a lot of people called them on it that it wasn't really an in-house movement. It was a third-party movement with modification. The Tudor 1926, I don't know if it's currently using the Salida or currently using an ETA. They give it its own caliber number. They don't call it an in-house movement, but they do modify it. They Tudorify it in some way. It is regulated better than most of the ETAs and Salidas would be, but it's not an in-house movement. And so I mean, we'll know what's in this if we pop the case off. Like someone's going to open it up and figure out what it's powered by. Breitling will probably tell us. I haven't seen a big movement explosion where people lie about having an in-house movement and then get found out in quite a while. I think the Panerai thing was the last real big one. There was another brand that did something like this too. I don't think it was Breitling. I wanted to say maybe it was Tag, but I don't remember. But it's something that people are sensitive to. So I just wanted to go ahead and point it out. But anyway, I don't know. It's just, it was very telling to me in the interview for this discussion to be about, like, the way I read this is we are not developing our own chronographs. We're just going to use Breitling chronographs. Okay. So that we know now that the chronograph isn't going to be 25,000 Swiss francs because that was what it was going to be otherwise. But a three-hander without even a date, now this is the gold one, but the steel one, like, is 15,000 Swiss francs. So how much is the chronograph going to be? 20? I mean, it's got to be significantly higher than this has zero doesn't even have a date. This has zero complications. So I don't know. Of course, I am assuming that this indeed launches at 15,000, like he's kind of suggesting it will. But anyway, let me get caught up with chat because I feel like I'm rambling a little bit on it. But it was an interesting point because I think a lot of people maybe thought that UG was going to get back in the movement game because they did in the past when they were a huge manufacturer. But in that interview with Georges Kern, he also earlier in it points out that part of the reason they got UG and not some other brand that had been operating was he didn't get saddled with a bunch of stuff he didn't want, like employees and manufacturing equipment and stuff. Like they don't have any of that. They have the name. They have the name and the catalog of intellectual property that comes with the name, most of which is, if not all of which, is in the public domain at this point anyway. But that they bought the name. That's it. They don't have like movement equipment. It's not like Zenith and, hidden in the attic. They've got all the stuff to be able to make more El Primeros. They don't have that. They don't have the capacity to make that stuff. So you're going to have to Breitling-fy it, or else you're going to dump a lot of money into this sort of thing. But that's my take on it. All right, so let's see. Tuna says, being owned by Breitling, they are bound to go the chronograph route. And they discuss chronographs in the interview, or Georges Kern does with his interview with Monochrome. And as Koji noted, they were known for chronographs historically. They had some, so it absolutely is going to happen. Koji says, if memory serves, the Polerouter was the first micro rotor movement back in the mid-50s. I have zero idea if that is the case or not, so hopefully your memory is solid. Dr. LK says, Dennis, let me take this opportunity to thank you for your videos in general. I find myself agreeing with you. Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the video. I don't mind whether you agree with me or not. The whole thing for me with doing this just as a hobby and the other channels I like to watch is to hear opinions just in general. I'm okay with disagreeing with the individuals too, as long as I want it to make me think. So, because that's part of the fun is to, we talk about watches. Thinking about watches is fun. I think it's fun. And so just going over and going, why does this work for me? Or why does this not work? And kind of exploring that is sort of what I do on some of these live streams. And on other ones, we just talk about new releases, but and give our thoughts on those sort of things. But anyway, I do appreciate it. And of course, I totally understand this is not a very convenient live time for a lot of people. I'm in the United States and I am doing this in like before lunch and West Coast wise, it would be like at breakfast time. It's a weird time, but I needed a time where I could be consistent. And this was the time that worked out because I've tried to do evening weekday shows, which are better attended, but I'm so tired and my schedule is so weird. It just gets really, really challenging. Speaking of challenging was the close case back making underachieving watch collector suspicious this might be the SW300. I mean, ultimately we will know. We will pop it open. Or honestly, if someone were to ask Georges Kern, and maybe it's discussed. I don't know if maybe in this in the blog to watch didn't put in the. Let me go ahead and give you the stats on this actually, because this was helpful, I think. So they actually got this pretty thin. These are 35 millimeter watches. That's going to be a turnoff for a lot of people anyway in this day and age. That they kept full kudos that they kept it that small as a round watch, though. I mean, that's a bold move too. It's got good lug length, though. I think a lot of people that are comfortable wearing 36 millimeters will be okay with this. But it's under 10 millimeters thick. 9.95 does not, to Koji's point about the Polerouter possibly being the first micro rotor movement, 9.95, though, doesn't mean necessarily that this is a micro rotor watch. The Tudor 1926 with its ETA has a regular rotor, and it's thinner than 10 millimeters also. So I can't judge there. 45.4 lug to lug. That's a little bit shorter than most Seiko 5s. 50 meters water resistance. That's okay for a dress watch. I was wondering, though, if they said what the, let's see, in the late, oh, well, here's the, we're learning, Koji. All right, so A Blog to Watch actually mentions that. I did not read the A Blog to Watch article. I just grabbed it for photos. Polerouter was enhanced by the world's thinnest movement at the time, a microtor. That's a weird way to say. Okay, the microtor, automatic caliber, with a whole 2-day power reserve. Okay, let's see. I don't know. The thinness was achieved by positioning the rotor between the plate and the bridges instead of above the movement, like in most self-winding watches. That's the historical one. And okay, I was hoping maybe they said what this movement was, but I don't see anything about it. Anyway, back to a picture of a watch, because we ain't getting anywhere with that. Under he says, I see in-house movements as a negative, expensive servicing, monopoly, and limited part supply. Plus, as you say, new movements are most like more. I can speak. I promise I can. Plus, as you say, new movements are most likely less reliable for a period. Yeah, I mean, again, I use Tudor as the example, but the El Primero 3600, when it came out, there were a lot of the early ones that ended up. I actually held off on getting my Zenith Chronomaster original, in part because the early batches were often going back because there was a part issue. I had a situation with a movement that was a Solita, but it was modified by Schwartz at Team. That was the Ming, 1709. I had the Ming Messina Lab collab, and those all went out, and they were all faulty. They all needed to be fixed. And it turned out there was a change from the SW200-1 to the SW200-2, if I remember correctly. I think that was the base movement. And the change didn't document where some of the parts were modified in terms of tolerance, and it didn't have the strength to properly power what they wanted to do, and the hands would slip. A very big issue. Like, I'm not just talking time setting. I have a video on that if you want to go back and look at it. You could literally watch the watch run, like I time-lapsed it, watch it for an hour, and you'd have it lined up for 10 a.m. And then at 11 a.m., that hour hand wasn't even at 11, but the minute hand was ready. It was a mess, total mess. They did get it figured out and fixed, but absolutely, it is an issue under Hay that does come up with these sort of things. But I do like is we don't see Solita pushing the bounds here on movement stuff. Like, why don't we have third-party movements where we don't have, why 38 hours of power reserve? Why can't we have 70 hours of power reserve from Solita? Well, where are they going to make that money? They're currently making enough money selling 38-hour power reserves to micro brands left and right. So, and if you want a little bit more, you get an SW300. It's sort of like that. But I mean, so I see pros and cons. It's just in the hobby, we have and I am guilty of it as well, but we have a bad habit. I'm going to brand it a bad habit of going, oh, in-house mean better. No. In-house means they had to do something that cost them money. Yes. But doesn't necessarily mean the watch is better for it. In fact, sometimes the watch is worse for it. David, thank you, incidentally, David, for being a 99-cent club member. I do appreciate your support. Says, I value movement finishing. If someone finishes a Solita to a high horology standards, I'd be happy to pay high horology prices for it. I think that is a very underappreciated stance. And I definitely think that it's easy for people to forget that just because it says like NH on it or Miyota or Solita, you can actually have it look nice. It can be finished. In fact, there are some high-end watchmakers and their brands are really more about taking the third-party movements and just putting in a lot of finishing to them. And I don't mean a laser engraved micro rotor. I just mean, and it varies. There's a whole spectrum. It can be like high-end hand guilloche application to bridges and such. I've seen that sort of stuff. And then on the more approachable end, like the Flieger I used to own from Stova, it has a Salida in it, a hand. It's not the 200, it's a 20 something. It's a hand wind version, but they finished it. Like there was Glashütte striping on it, or well, they're not in Glashütte, so we'll say Black Forest striping on it. It was a pretty attractive watch for $1,000. It was under $1,000 at the time. I was like, this is a really good looking movement. I was surprised at that price point because I was so used to seeing Seiko 5s not be decorated, or Tudor in their in-house movement. And I know Scotty Pinball loves how I always bring this one up, but like I like their sterling silver Black Bay, but it's a display case back, and they don't decorate it. Like my Stova was better decorated, and it was 1/4 the price. I'm just like, put in a little effort, or hide it. If you don't want to put in the effort, I respect that, but hide it. I get it on really, really affordable watches because a lot of people getting into watches want to just see it work. But to me, there's like a delta. We got the bell curve going on, and at some point we get high enough up where it needs to be covered, or you need to decorate it. And honestly, you get high enough up, it should be decorated even if it is covered. Quite frankly, that's my stance. But you definitely can take Bosch movements and decorate them. There is no rule that says you can't, and there are brands that do it. They don't get a lot of attention because usually that effort results in a price point where they're no longer competitive with the NTHs of the world and such, where you're trying to get the most bang for the buck spec wise. Movement finishing is one of the first things to go because it's just wasted money. It doesn't help the specs at all. But as a collector, I really appreciate it. So David, that was a really good point to bring up. Koji says, Vintage UG did very nice movement finishing. I'm happy that my Polerouter is a rare bird that has an open caseback to see how well done it is. Yeah, open casebacks historically were exceedingly rare. And so it's quite exciting to go ahead and get a good chance to see some of them when they happen to have been done. And you'd see on some like higher end brands, they do like the Hunter caseback where it's a solid caseback and then you could open it up almost like a pocket watch. So just sort of that. I'm just changing photos so you're not stuck seeing the same image the entire time. So, because I figured you'd rather look at that than just look at my head, take up the whole screen. Scotty. Oh, Scotty is here. Welcome, Scotty. Can a manufacturer buy and use a Geneva seal movement from another manufacturer? I do not know the answer to this. I don't know. Maybe someone in the chat knows. I'm sorry. I have absolutely no idea I didn't even know what Geneva seal was until a couple of years ago. And someone had pointed out, when one of the show parts came out and it was a Geneva seal movement and they were really excited. And I was like, yeah, really excited. I was just like, I have no idea what this person is talking about. So I went and looked it up and read a little bit about the standard, but I didn't read whether or not like it has to be, if you can't let someone else do it or not. But I do know that it used to just be the movements, but now you have the movements and then the cases also get stamped. And I don't know if there's ever an instance where I think I had someone tell me that the case has to be Geneva seal as well. It has to be both, but they stamp both. So that's something I started to notice on the Vacherons. And I'd said it like, oh, it's Geneva seal case and movement. And someone had said, they're always going to be case and movement now, Dennis. It's not like just a one thing anymore. Joe says, in-house is an easy way to confirm it is a nice movement. That is not a guarantee because Citizen and Seiko have in-house workhorse movements. Sure. And I think I'm okay. Like conceptually, I'm okay with workhorse. Like, let me rephrase it another way. To me, an in-house movement should not exist solely to make a watch more expensive. And sometimes that's what it feels like. Sometimes I feel like all they did was reinvent the wheel. I'll give you an example. Yema, not a brand I've owned. Some of you might have some Yemas. Yema's a relatively popular micro brand. They kickstarted a micro rotor movement. It's like a media blast. It's not particularly well finished. The way they've done it makes it look nicer than it probably is, though, which was clever, but I'm rambling. I looked at it and I was like, so why would you want this over a Chinese micro rotor movement, like the ones that get dropped into really, really affordable watches? And I couldn't see anything that I recall that Yema brought to the table. They got it 0.01 millimeters thinner than the generic Chinese micro rotor watch movement I found that you could buy off of eBay. And so I was like, so it's not really not thinner enough to matter for a brand like Yema. And so to me, it begged the question, why do it? And to me, I mean, well, they had two things going for them. One, they were Kickstartering it, so they weren't even paying for it. Y'all were paying for it, those of you who supported the Kickstarter. And then the second thing was so that they could say that it was an in-house movement and they could charge you more for their watches. I couldn't figure out any other thing. I don't remember it having a better power reserve. It didn't help the watches. I mean, it got their watches slimmer, but they could have done a third-party micro rotor and achieved the same thing. I don't like seeing in-house like that. I want them to have to do something. Like Tudor's in-house movement made sense because it significantly expanded the power reserve, right? Rolex's in-house movements, I mean, they've been doing in-house forever, so it's kind of a weird one to cite, but it makes sense. Like they have their the superlative chronometer standard that they've set for themselves for the accuracy. They have really good power reserves, yada, yada, yada. So those things make sense. The attempt with the coaxial movements with Omega to try and reduce the wear of the escapement system makes sense. I don't love that one because it's a really thick movement, but it makes sense. Patek Philippe saying, let's get up to 45 hours of power reserve and add hacking. That doesn't make sense for your cubitus. It doesn't make sense. And you didn't shape the movement. So it just showed how lazy you were. So, I mean, so for me, it cannot just be that it's better. I want to see an actual physical improvement. And for a brand like Patek to brag about having hacking in the 21st century is quite frankly embarrassing. But I mean, it's just sort of where we've ended up being, I think. So, I mean, everyone has their own take, though. Let's see. We have Koji saying, oh, I already covered that one. Sorry. Yep, I've scrolled too far back up. All right. David says to Scotty, the Geneva seal is now a full watch hallmark. So no. Okay. So there you go. You can't just sell the movement anymore. It comes as a whole package. Joe follows up from his in-house statement to say, I also like my Chopard Alpine Eagle in-house movement, but I can also see that the much nicer movement in the Salmon Dial small second version. I might have a video of it, but I at one point took side by side their Chopard LUC without the Geneva and their Chopard, like the Salmon one, I think it was the one I used, with the hallmark. And you can see that they're both very handsomely decorated. You see the step up just in the JPEGs on the Geneva one. Like the lines were deeper. There was more detail to the finishing, and all of that. So yeah, you can see a difference. But Chopard has a very nice movement, even if you don't get it with the hallmark. But I would expect that out of a jewelry brand. So Phil, welcome to the live stream, Phil. Let's hope that the new Polerouter isn't a silly price. There's many models in the UG catalog they can keep high end. Yeah, I don't know for sure that where they will price the Polerouters at. I will say that with Georges Kern saying in this interview that the plan is to launch the time-only models, well, he phrased it as non-complicated steel, at 15,000 Swiss francs, or that would be 17,000 US dollars, that I think the Polerouter is going to be in that boat. And so I expect the Polerouter to launch in 2026 at 17,000 US. And I would say, Phil, that to me, that is a silly price, but I mean, it's their company. They can do what they want with it, I guess. Archie, welcome to this live stream. Hello. Hope things are going well for you. Scotty says, I enjoy the Tudor movement, but it's an acquired taste. I like that. Like, I like how it winds. I like when I had one, I had an in-house one in a Black Bay bronze. That was a no date. But I like the power reserve. I like how it whined. I like how it felt on the wrist, like with the rotor. But I like Tudor's movement. I just don't like looking at it. If that makes sense. And I didn't have to look at it on mine. I had a closed case back. So that was kind of the situation. But anyway, we actually did end up getting an hour out of Universal Genève. I wasn't sure that we would, but okay. So basically with the live chat, it seems like the biggest concerns are the pricing, where they're going to ultimately launch these at. And every indication from Georges Kern has been starting at $17,000 for stainless steel simple watches. So that is higher than where Universal Genève historically had been positioned. We will ultimately see in a little over a year where those all shake out with the mainline production stuff. Maybe market research will tell them that they can't get away with doing it that high. I don't know. This is not the ideal time to launch a watch brand. I'm not going to say we're in a watch recession, but obviously everything compared to where we were in the pandemic is a great deal more cooled off than we used to see back in the day. But That is it for this live stream. I am going to go and get lunch. You all are going to go and do more fun things than sit and listen to me prattle on about wristwatches. Again, I should have my Stay of the Collection video out this weekend. I'm about halfway through the editing, and we will plan on another live stream next Saturday. I have no idea what the topic will be, but I should be available to go ahead and do that. And I think that'll be pretty much it. So thank you everyone for tuning in live. If you didn't, share your comments about Universal Genève below. I do go back and read the comments, and I'll talk to you all on the next video. Take care, everybody.